Hello, everybody. It is Tara Boothby, and I'm here with Felicia Murrell. And Felicia is important to me on several levels. Number one, personally, Felicia edited my book, Love and Love's Energy. And then Felicia has this beautiful book we can simply call And. We'll have pictures of it and all the information so that you can find Felicia's book. But what's beautiful about Felicia and I in this point of our story, and we're going to hear lots from Felicia, but I wanted to preface to say that this timeline, Felicia wrote her book End, and then unbeknownst to me, I thought, oh, Felicia Murrell, you know what? I've heard good things. Brad Jerzak, all these people, Felicia, and then my editor David was like, you should reach out to Felicia for editing. So I did. Felicia had finished her book. Felicia reads my book and edits it. I finish my book and then I read Felicia's book. I just love that timeline. It's really special to me. So we've written these books on love, and they have this beautiful sisterhood that I see. But I also I don't know. So Felicia, first, let's just get this rolling. How do you sort of give your spiel, or to say this is what the book End is about? How can you explain to people this is what my book's about?
Yeah. I say that And is my wrestle and my love story. It is essentially my journey through leaving the poles of duality, leaving the binaries, leaving the extreme, and learning through the process of stillness and solitude um, to widen my interior space to hold and to be able to see as a witness and an observer that there are multiple sides to the same mountain, um, and to hold that and to hold it with tenderness and compassion. So that's what I say this is. There's several threads that are woven through the book. There's church, there's womanhood, there's motherhood, there's racial issues, but all of these are part of who I am. And so I think you see the whole of it inside of this. Hopefully you do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do. I felt like um I saw you in this book. I saw Felicia. I heard you. I had this sense, this comment in my mind was, I am listening. And so there the duality softened for me. That was my experience as I read Anne.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, and there's this beautiful thing when somebody so freely or authentically says, "This is who I am." Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, you share that who I am piece, and and I think that's important as well. And like you and I have similarities and differences. But and did something for me as I was reading your story, and it wasn't about, oh, here's Felicia who's different than me. Here's Felicia who is being and who is being with me.
I love that.
Mm.
I love that. I think that it's beautiful to sometimes we want to collapse the world and only talk about the unity and the similarities. And I think it's important that when we talk about love, that love fully sees, and so it holds a place for both our similarities and our distinctions and our uniqueness of personhood and those differences. And we're not afraid of them. There's no fear. It's just, what it is.
Yeah, because we put so much potency in that. Who's right, who's wrong, whose story is being told louder, or all these things, but there's this gentleness of, I don't know. I don't know what your creative process was like, how you allowed your voice to be gentle or to trust that I'll be listened to. Or maybe you didn't.
I honestly don't know that I even considered it. Um, what I always lean into is power with, and what I hope is that the words on the page, even my being, that is an invitation, one that is an invitation to freedom. Some people are afraid of freedom and they find freedom offensive or scary. But I want freedom to be an invitation that we can trust and surrender to the sacred presence of love, that even when we cannot see and cannot know, there's still the ability to trust and surrender. And so I want it to be an invitation. And then I think the other thing that I want is I want the words in my being to be a mirror, that when you read them and when you see me, that it's a reflection of you in some ways, that it opens up the world to give you pause to turn inward to yourself. Um, and so we've done a lot of attacking ourselves and judging ourselves and beating ourselves up and shaming ourselves and sabotaging ourselves. And when we can hold the fullness of who we are, head, heart, gut, mind, body, spirit, all of that, with a tenderness, then, and stop judging ourselves and stop cutting ourselves off and doing that. If we can do that for ourselves, we can turn around and do it for other
Mm.
people. And so I hope that's the softness that comes across. I do know that I have a capacity to be angry, to be very, I won't say forceful, but just very like resolute in how I feel about injustice. And that's also very much a part of me as well. So I don't ever want to lose any part of me. I want to acknowledge all the pieces and parts that make me me. And as you say so beautifully in your book, to let them all, be loved, lovable, and loving, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I just, what you said here is so meaty. If I cut that off of me, or cut something out, I better stop this. Then I better stop that in you. And that's some of what, when you talk about this, your own Black experience, your church experience, your female experience, but so much of the us versus them with the color of our skin is, if I cut this off of me, if I won't look at me, I can't hear Felicia's actual beautiful story about you being a vibrant Black woman, and to feel the pain, the story you talk about in school that really struck me when you were little, and you were as good enough to play with you on the playground but not good enough to go to your house. And I felt that taught me something about my friends who have a different color of skin than I do, in a way that I had never been taught. You
Thank
know,
you.
I just heard it and I was like, oh my, like, wow. That's a different, no matter experience I might have had, that is a different flavor of a story than a story I could have ever experienced.
And I think because of it, I was reflecting back on that story one day, just sitting with spirit. And I had this realization that lived experience marked me so deeply that I, I I typically do not show up without being invited. Like I'm going to wait for someone to extend an invitation before I would come to someone's house or call or whatever. And I'm not likely to invite myself. Like you're going to have to say to me, Felicia, we'd love for you to come or whatever like that. And when I trace it back, I can trace it back to being marked by that experience and how, because of that, this is how I situate and move and how it's, you know, influenced and informed how I show up in the world. And so even that is an invitation sometimes to sit with just little small memories and experiences and see how, even when we don't think that they've left an imprint, that they influence and inform how we situate our adult selves inside of friendships and things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, when you play it forward, as you just did, there's so much that we can miss in plain sight of here's all these things that we would never know about Felicia. I mean at Open Table Conference 2022 and you were there and it was just like I missed meeting you and it's like Felicia Murrell is here and I just see you as this leader and this beacon, this speaker. And I would never know at what's hidden in plain sight and these beautiful things that we miss out on when we just don't hear that. And that again, it does fit. I like how you tied that in, that our lovable and loving parts, like that story, that little girl in that story is loved, lovable and loving, and she's a part of the voice that you share this story so that I know you better, but also whomever hears this story is like, how many times do people misunderstand me because I'm not letting them know it's really hard on me because of my own little inner Felicia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. It's so easy. And I like what you mentioned, you're talking to spirit. One of the things that I got out of your book that surprised me was the language of the Holy Three. And I'd never heard that. I don't know how common it is, but as somebody who does not want to abuse people with my own spirituality and trying to figure out how do I honor my belief in God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but take away some of that potency of how those words have been misused.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt so ministered to with your language of the Holy Three. I was like, that's it. That feels really safe for me.
I'm so glad by that. I have to just give credit to a minister named Claire, and those are her words. The first time I heard them, I actually really in my journey have come to a place where I want to hold the whole. I want to hold the whole of the divine as sacred mother, sacred father, that we are both fathered by divine parenting and we are mothered by divine parenting in our the way that we are comforted and welcomed and nurtured. And I also want to hold place for my human kin that are non-binary. And so when I think of Trinity, because of the dance and the dynamism between divine parent, Jesus, spirit, I see there. I see plurality.
Yes.
So I was using a non binary, just they, them, their pronoun. And my publisher was like, Felicia, I think that might be taking too many people too far too soon.
Yeah.
What we don't want is for there to be resistance that people shut down and don't hear what you have. We really want them to hear the power of the words. And so I had to sit with hearing that and honoring their expertise and wisdom in the publishing industry with my own authenticity. And how do I be genuine to myself? And how do I hold space in the circle of life for my human kingdom who are non binary? I will not exclude them. I will not harm them with my language. So, how do I include? How I want to be um, a love bearer who always has at the forefront of my mind inclusion and integration. And so, how do I do that? And um, Claire uses so beautifully the Holy Three when she's talking and when she's ministering. And I was like, oh, this is the language. This is the
Yeah.
language of Trinity that is inclusive and it's not too far too soon. And so we had to go back and edit the non-binary pronouns, and that was what I chose to use because I felt like it was the and that would hold the truth of my being and how I see the divine and what the publisher was asking for me.
I that is I well I mean I feel the spirit leaping inside of me. I feel such joy because I had the same wrestle for myself, and I hope people can hear Felicia in this moment, in this conversation, because the voice of what I mean, I've said femology, like we need a femology in our theology. This beautiful nurturing piece of the Godhead. But I wrestled too, and I will joke, and I mean I say this as a joke, and I think that the Holy Three chuckle with me when I say that they're the original trans, you know, like they're they them. There's three. But it's moving too far too quickly, where 10 years ago it could have been said in a way that meant something, but there is this God is God and we are not. And so I in Love and Love's energy, I felt I feel this real sacredness that I was able to write a book about love and to question supernatural love and God and not gender God.
I
And I
love
know it's like this, like it's so important.
that. It's so important. And I can see my own trajectory, even in my first book that I wrote, which I self-published, and it's called Truth Encounters. But Truth Encounters is part memoir. Um, I am a post-abortive woman. I had an abortion at 16. And so the book tells the story of that, leading up to that experience, and how that experience colored a lot of the rage and the violence and what was going on inside of me, my interior journey. And then it walks through inner healing essentially. I did a lot of both inner healing modalities and therapy to get to that place. And so the book is my story of dealing with myself, father issues, mother issues, and then it invites the reader into their own inner healing journey at the end. There's questions and places to sit with spirit in that. And but how I got to Truth Encounters was really through a revelation of God as Father. I grew up in a world, in a church setting where I never ever heard anyone stand in a pulpit and say, God is love, or talk about God as love. I never, I don't recall that language until I was an adult. I knew God as a punisher, God as an enforcer, God as this big, controlling, omnipotent, sovereign being in the sky out there. I knew it was important to say the sinner's prayer for fire insurance so I didn't go to hell. And I'm using air quotes because I don't believe in eternal conscious torment anymore. But that, that's how I knew God. And so I and I loved Jesus. I actually, in my own quiet, private time, I could tell you story after story of personal encounters in my bedroom with a little bitty red New Testament in spirit. And and so I loved this. I was having these mystical, I can name them now as mystical kind of experiences, but the idea of church and the God that was presented there, I didn't want. And I actually remember somewhere between 12 and 16, I remember saying to God, like, I want to serve you. I want to live for you, but you're not fun. So I'm going to go live my life, and then I'll come back. And when I said that, I stopped for a long time having those private experiences that were going on. And I grew up, and we, raised our kids in the church, and we did all that, but I was really angry. I sat in church a lot, hiding my Kindle inside my Bible, and I would sit in church and read my Kindle while instead of listening, because I was bored to death. And I kept thinking in my heart, there has to be more. There has to be more than this. This is, I'm angry. I'm not parenting well, but I'm going to church every Sunday, hallelujah, and all of this, and putting on a facade. But this is doing nothing for me. And some people came from New Zealand that teach about this idea a sacred parent, as you know, and they talk about God not just as love, but loving you right now, the experience of that. And it was for the first time my eyes and ears were open to something. And about the time that I encountered that, Paul Young's book, The Shack, came out. And so it was like a double whammy. And I was primed for that, the cry of my heart that had always been, there has to be more. And and shortly after that, I was introduced to centering prayer and started exchange my daily Bible devotion reading for just being and sitting in silence. And inside of the silence, a lot of divine therapy. Father Thomas Keating would use that word. All of the things that had been packed down started coming up, and I began to change. And so that was a decade and a half of love loving me and exchanging lies for truth, and really touching that inner child that was so traumatized and hurt, But I thought that was going to be all, and it turned out just to be the beginning, because opening myself up to love in that way moved me from God the Father to now, oh, there's a bigger picture of the divine than just a patriarchal being. And that's been the invitation of the last decade and a half, since that has just been the widening and the broadening and the more expansive kind of um, I don't want to use the word universal and scare people, but just there's a larger picture here
Yeah.
of how God is in the world. So I appreciate the
Yeah.
start of it. So I'll always honor that part, right? But I also have to include, like you said, the feminology too, because there is more than just the patriarchal God as father. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And there's, oh my word, I love listening to you. And I think the psychologist in me can get really afraid when we get so in love with love, supernatural love, and the Holy Three as love. But when I'm listening to you, I'm like, this is exactly why I wrote my book. And what I hear in yours is we work with our self-love. And your story, that beautiful story you have about loving your empty womb and making meaning of that, and then how that transforms our relationships. And we try to fake it. We go to church and we do the hallelujah, or we look good at work, or we do whatever we do, but we're hiding our Kindle in our book. I love that you said that too, because you're like, I wasn't 12. When did Kindles come around? This is like not that
Right.
long ago.
It wasn't that long ago, trust
No.
me. We're talking late 90s. Yes.
So it's like, I mean, I'm a grown woman, and I love that part. And wrestling with our human relationships. Let love love you. And the supernatural thing, that's my experience. That's what I hear in you, is like, I didn't try to make the supernatural happen. We give it up. We get disgruntled by this, like, forcing to be in this church building, this synagogue, this mosque, whatever it is. It gets old when it's just the building is the focus, because love loved you in its own, like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's the
colorful,
receiving
strange
part.
way.
We have to receive it. And because I think so much of our world, even in self-help books, and I'm a fan of them. I read a lot. Um, but even in that, we're looking for, tell me what to do, tell me how to do. And our mindset is still, what can I do to change? And it's the doing part, that we tend to go to, and we miss the being part. And I would say, and I think it's both. Again, I don't want to parse it and cut it in half or make an extreme of it. I think it's and, because I think what happened, um, in the receiving of love, what happened inside for the first time, I was safe enough to trust, and I was safe enough to surrender, and I was safe enough to hear. And so when people ask me, you know, I always say, whatever place you can go to, for me, that's a lot of solitude and stillness. It's not the same for everyone, but whatever place you can go to inside yourself or with yourself, that you can allow your walls to come down, that armored, defended posture that we take, that you can allow it to come down so the most vulnerable parts of you are exposed. and allow love to come rushing in to those parts, to tend, right? To tend and nurture the parts that long to be heard, that are just there waiting, for the safety of the moment to say, we're still here. We want to be parented. We want to be loved and lovable and loving. We want to be known. We want to be seen and heard, and that are waiting for all the really ungodly beliefs and the lies we believed about ourselves to
Yeah.
be exchanged for truth, right?
Yeah. The lies we believed, and like to this meaty thing about the doing and the being, like and religious abuse, spiritual abuse is so often we put the emphasis on the doing, look the part, hide the flaws, don't talk about having had an abortion or whatever other things we're hiding, you know. In my book I talk about my deep down fear of being heartless. That is not something a Christian person talks about, because that is evil. Probably some people would be like, wow, what kind of Christian would ever say that? A
I love
real
what
one.
you mentioned in your book about people trying to talk you out of,
Yeah.
saying that, or like smooth it over, not really smooth it over, but just
Yeah.
correct you because of that sense of, oh my God. And I thought, ooh, how interesting that her saying that would provoke in them a, no, you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, but it's so it's, but that being, you know, like we have to, the more we are in our being, we are human beings, we're whole people.
That's
We're flawed, and we're flawed, fabulous, and love. We're flawed, and that's a part. It's along for the ride, and then that being, it transforms the doing, so that it's like I don't want to hide my Kindle and my book and pretend to hallelujah. I'm tasting the ice cream. I'm smelling the wine. I'm holding the hand. I'm loving the child, no matter their pronouns. It's this being in the essence of love. And then we start saying, well, what the frick am I attached to?
yeah. Yeah, I'm bringing my whole self to this moment, to be present with love, to participate with love, to be seen by love, to be transformed by love, but also to be love, right? Love flow to me, love flow through me, and I get to participate in this moment. And I think often of, for me, the first time I heard this question, it really rocked me. And Baxter Kruger said, do you believe what he said, God, but for me, I say love. We're talking the same. Do you believe what love believes about you? And I thought, my first question is, in the quiet of my heart, love, what do you believe about me? Before I was formed in my mother's womb, the image and the likeness that you had of me, tell me the story, show me, you know. And I have this encounter. I'm pretty sure it's in my book, maybe in bits and pieces. But one year for my birthday, I put some candles on, had some instrumental music playing, and I asked that question. And I had like this almost outer body experience of being in a conversation, listening to the conversation of the Holy Three as they are, um, knitting the pieces and parts and the whole of me. And there's this thing of like, for a time she'll walk outside her name. And my name Felicia means, um, joyous, happy. In Spanish it's like felicity, or where you would get Feliz Navidad. Um, and it was for a time she shall walk outside her name, and then she'll come to herself. Not she'll come to me, but she'll come to herself, and she'll remember. And I could feel the joy of the Holy Three in this conversation that was happening, right? And I remember, I dried my hands off and I grabbed my journal and I'm writing this, like I have to keep this moment forever. And the thing that was so funny, is that most of my whole life growing up until I became an adult, I was known by my middle name, which is just a name that my an aunt on one side of the family and an uncle on the other side of the family concocted over a drunk session and said, let's name her this. And it really has no meaning at all. It's just but everyone in my hometown, that's what they know me and call me by. And um, as I came home to myself and began to love myself the way love loves me and see myself the way love sees me, I understood the fullness of my name and the gift that it was in coming home to me, right? And so that the pieces and parts of me, not cutting them off, but allowing them to be and to be whole and wholly who I am, that absolutely, absolutely, it changed me forever. And I'm thankful for it in a way. Um, but when you speak of the church hurt and the spiritual abuse and stuff, I too had that, right? And
Mhm.
thankfully, though, I'd had the encounter with love prior to. And so, where I could have, because of wounded people, because really that's, where the church hurt happens is from wounded, hurt people. I could have walked away from it all. I could have became an atheist and just been done with the whole kit caboodle and shebang of it. But the seal on my heart was of love. And I can never not be in relationship with the Holy Three because the Holy Three saved me. The Holy Three transformed me. And I am because of that relationship, and that allowed me to understand that this is a journey, an invitation that we all are invited to. But the thing about an invitation is that we get to choose whether we say yes to
Yeah.
it or not.
Yeah, we can choose. I just feel again in my heart and my gut, there's just the most beautiful sensation as I listen, and I feel my eyes might leak because I'm just feeling all the feels of my own story as I'm listening to you. And you know that we do get to choose and we do get to consent. We're always included, but do we see it? And I think whether person is a church going person or a mosque going person or whatever, if you've had religion, no matter to what to the level you've had religion, you have spiritual abuse because religion abuses us. And here's two women who have a lot of like years behind us, Bible school, leading church, all these things. And so it's like, yeah, we get it. Let's normalize it a bit. And you mentioned Baxter, and I your Baxter story. I have my Paul story where where Paul Young said to me, you're pure of heart. And it was a slow burn. It was on my back burner, and I don't even know how many months I could picture Paul on my Zoom screen, and I could hear the tone in his voice of gentle, loving frustration. You're pure of heart, right? And that's your Baxter story. These are two guys like Baxter. I mean, maybe we all have a Baxter Kruger and a William Paul Young that are so exuberantly full of love and transparent about their shortcomings. If there's a man who says, look at how terrible I was, it's Paul. And then he loves, you know. So I hear you, and because I'm hearing you, I hear myself. Like you said, let's break through that wall. That's the thing about listening. This is a book, so I've called it a listening book. You'll read the book, but in reading Felicia, listen to Felicia. I didn't have to do anything more. I didn't have to jump ahead and try to piece together. I was just listening to you, and then I saw you. I knew you.
I love that.
Hmm.
I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you. I felt
Yeah.
such a deep resonance reading your book as well. I really did, and I'm glad that it's being released into the earth for others to have that as a guide for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like that too. Released into the earth. And if you're okay, I'd like to, I mean, I love the story that you just mentioned about your first book and your testimony of abortion and womb. be because I was thinking about wombs yesterday. So I'm curious for how you notice this and that the spiritual awakening for women who have had a trauma in their womb. And if you're, I don't know, I'm putting that out there. It's a weird question, but I'm curious what you'll do with how you make sense of that, the trauma in our womb and what that teaches us about love.
Hmm, that's a great question. I think people handle that differently.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm really, really grateful. I have to mention there was a course that I ended up taking. And so there's a story, kind of a backstory to this. Um, at the time that I received a lot of healing from being post abortive, I was a pastor's wife, and my husband was on staff at a now it's like a 3,000 member church. At that time, we had about 1,900 members, so it continues to grow. And I felt like I could not let people know that this was in my background and this was my story. Um, but our church actually had a ministry for post abortive women. And it was a 12-week program called Healing the Brokenhearted. And I think it's a national program. We had two people that were trained to walk women through this. And so I also was mentoring women, just in my role as a pastor's wife and that kind of thing. And I was mentoring a young lady who had had an abortion, and she and her husband were trying to get pregnant, and very unsuccessfully for about 2 or 3 years. And she felt like the reason why she couldn't get pregnant was because God was punishing her for having had an abortion when she was a teenager. And when she said it, I grabbed her hands and I said, "Oh no." I said, "I had an abortion when I was 16." And her eyes just really wide, like in surprise. And I said, "And I don't know a lot about God, but I know that God is just and God is fair. And so if God was punishing you for and keeping you from getting pregnant because you had an abortion, I wouldn't have 4 children today. Like our punishments would be just and fair." And so I said, now remember that really my soul had been longing to take this class for myself, but I didn't think I could because of how it would look for Pastor Doug's wife to be in this class. Um, and I said, we have this um, ministry, and I would be willing to go with you through it if you would like to do that. And she said, "You would do that for me?" And I was like, "Yes, yeah, sure I would." And she agreed. And so we both signed up. And then right before the next cycle of this class was to start, her one of her parents, I believe it was her mom, got gravely ill and was in Washington State. And so she was going to have to leave and not go. And part of the covenant that you sign is that you commit to being there for all of the every, week of the 12 weeks, blah, blah, blah. And so she was going to have to wait. And so I thought, okay, do I wait or do I go through this? And so I talked to Kim, our facilitator, about it, and I decided to go ahead and go through it. And one night in the class, one of our lessons was we had to write a letter um, of forgiveness essentially to ourselves. And I had been carrying around a lot of rage about an incident with a guy and some things that had happened. And as I'm sitting there, Kim had some quiet music playing, just instrumental music playing, and all of us in the class are writing our letters. And heat is rising up from my toes all through my body. I am just so, and I initially I start writing this letter very kindly, and before I know it, I'm almost tearing the paper with the anger. And I feel it. And then the writing goes from the heat to the anger to wailing. And I don't know when people left. I don't know, but I know that the class ended, people left, and I was still there with myself. Kim left the music playing on repeat. And it was that day inside of me that I was probably the most honest ever, because everything in me wanted to make someone else pay. And just to be honest about the trauma and the revenge, wanting to exact revenge. And I couldn't get that day to the place of forgiving anybody, not myself, not the people, but the honesty was forgiveness enough. It became the open door, right? And so a lot of people, when you talk about wounding and trauma, a lot of people are cloaking that in anger, cloaking it in pain, cloaking it in all these things. And all I know is honesty was the first step for me. And when the pain of it hit the air, from there we could really do some work.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad I asked you to talk about that. I'm like, oh, and it's that all of you is included. You know,
Yeah.
you included your whole self. You've just loved yourself and you broke through the like, I'm a pastor's wife writing this little letter, you know, and the uh, love loved you.
Yes.
And then you loved you in that moment, and all of the layers of meeting yourself and being met by love and meeting this man or this boy or whomever. There was a meeting that happened for you inside of you with that person. Somehow you were, it's beautiful, and that's love.
Yeah. Enough
And
to
we
be honest. And that's the thing is because again, there's all these places and parts in the journey where I can go, from that point, honesty has always been my friend, and it's my check-in. And so when people ask me to do something or to say something or to write something, I, I okay, does this feel genuine to me? Does this feel like my authentic self? Am I being honest with me? Because what I realize is that I will never, ever again invade or abandon myself. I will never deceive myself again. And
yes,
so befriending honesty was a real key, has been a real key to the whole part of me, accepting the whole of who I am.
it's so powerful. And when you say that, I'll never um betray or abandon myself again. And I think of like me talk about my fear of being heartless in my book, and I it's such a profoundly huge part of who I am for so long. And I'll still say who I am. It's so included, but my relationship with that fear, especially since I put it in the book, where it is so alive. It's so much even, it's more alive in me now than it's ever been, but it feels so loved. And the dark romance of that flaw, that negative belief, it's so different.
I was talking to my spiritual director once about how I live a very um, quiet life, a very content life. And I love my life. I'm completely fine not being out and having all of that. I love it. But sometimes um, contentment can lead to indifference or apathy. And so the thing that I have to realize is that even in my introverted self and that quiet part of me that's content being hidden, content not being seen, I also recognize that part of the gift that spirit has placed within me is external facing. And so I say often to the Holy Three, I will say yes unless it's no. I will say yes unless it's no. And I have to do that so that I don't slip into indifference or apathy. And she said, I'm so confused. Like, why do you say these things about yourself? And I said, because they're the truth of who I am. And I am not a person who only sees my good parts. Because the parts, my propensities and tendencies are as much a part of me as all the good things. And I will not hype myself up with an imbalance, right? I am all of me. Um, Evening and morning were the first day. I'm a whole person.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, perfect. Perfectly imperfect. And
Yes.
then knowing that there's this peaceful sense of self, and yeah, just lovely. And this, I don't know. So I'm thinking, so the the matters of differences between you and I, but the matter of similarity of being women writing these inside out books about God's love. And could we have written these books if we weren't women?
I
Yeah.
think when I look at men like Paul Young, who um, is very much acquainted through his own trauma and lived experience with both masculine and feminine energy, my answer to that is yes. Um, I think what happens though a lot of times is in the imbalance of patriarchy, men have not been allowed to be in touch with the soft, tender, um, feminine energy. But we all energy resides in Christ, and if we are in Christ, if there's a cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, then we all have access to both masculine energy and feminine energy. I'm gonna have to eventually find a language that's not gendered, but we have that the energy of both of those, things. Um, and it's not that women are one way. In our home, I tend to have more masculine energy. I am the fix it. I am the get it to a resolution. I that's me, And so my journey with love has been a softening, a tenderness, learning that to embrace my feminine energy as much as I do my masculine energy, and to carry them as a balance. And I think when we talk about, and that was one reason for the book for me, because I think in a world that is largely largely patriarchal and dominant centered, we miss the balance. I'm not saying get rid of all those things. I'm saying and what
And
what evens the scales is both. And so, but power over will always be afraid of sharing. And what we need is an invitation to come to even our scales with power with and that's what love does. Love is communal. It's communal.
I love, oh girl, I love how you said that. I'm like, yes, woman, yes. And I'm sorry, I mean, I'm celebrating ladies right now just because of I felt so inspired by I heard Sheriff Nordling Fee speaking yesterday, and I'm like, but it is exactly what you're saying in this feminist theology is the end. And in feminism is this place for I love me and I love you. You're my brother and you're my sister. And within love, within and is nonviolent protest. And nonviolent protest is not about the pronoun, even though we honor, Paul Young has a womb-ness. He has a womb theology because he's embraced that nonviolence in Jesus and the Holy Three. There is a feminine quality. There's an importance in women as there is in men, as there is in everyone. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's well said, Felicia.
But it goes back to like what you were saying about, God being the original trans. Because imagine there's a place for that, then it's a place for everyone, right? Like no one is excluded from the, no one there. Imagine that. And I
Yeah.
think about indigenous people and in indigenous cultures, they've always had what they called two spirit people,
Yes.
you know And so sometimes we act like a lot of this is brand new when it's not new. It's
No,
not new, you know.
no, and I think it's too, we understand sexuality in such a profoundly important way now. We have more insight. Psychology is a young field, and so it's inspired some of these dissecting of nuances, and that's where we're at with sexuality. But that I love the term two-spirited and the lineage in indigenous culture, which I just know a limited bit about. But may we all be two-spirited in the true essence of what that means. Because it's not just about sexuality, and the understanding people's view of their own sexual identity is so much more. It's this love thing as well, right? And we're all just people like everybody else.
When I think about the image of an ocean, I hear all the time spirits say, be like water. Because if we, if the Holy Three is the ocean and we are all like water, all of creation, not just humanity, not just humans, but really the whole of it, then that means at some point we have all intersected, touched one another. We all come from the same source. We're all swimming in the same source,
Oh yeah, all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful image. I feel like we could talk all day, and I'm like, everything you say, I'm like, oh, but I'm just wondering, we should probably wind things down here. And I appreciate you as a poetess, as a contemplative, as a spiritual advisor, director, as a human being who is who like what I say in my book, we all long to be heard with loving ears, to be seen with loving eyes, and to be known with a loving mind. And you've done that for yourself, and then you let us bear witness, and then we can start doing that for ourselves. And I appreciate you, Felicia. I'm so grateful for what you've done in my life.
Thank you so very much. It's always an honor. It really is, just to be with people, to bear witness to people, to support people. It's the thing that I love about editing. I love the refining process. Um, and I love that about life too. I do. So having this conversation with you has meant so much to me. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you too. And I look forward to, I just say, okay, so I'll have the information to find out how to purchase Felicia's book and my book. I think especially for my audience up in Canada, and we'll put this on our Sojourn YouTube where it's mental health related. This is a great book. I got to read it in one sitting, and Felicia says, she's like, this is slow read, take your time. I think read it twice. When you can, find that pocket where you get to read it and you're just like with the book in that condensed way. And then there's a lot of poetry and prose in there. So to like take your time and let those words be like rich ganache. Because it's like the best chocolate. It is so sweet and so good.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, peace and love, Felicia. And I am so thankful to be getting to know you, and I look forward to knowing you more and more.
I do as well. Thank you.